This is a vicious day in the Tour de France. You never ruffle the feathers of the American. Armstrong is just cutting through the field. And he's coming down the finishing straight now like a Grand Prix motor car.
This is fabulous. This is unbelievable. The man was on the ground. He's had problems with his pedal and he's now decided to go out onto the attack.
Armstrong is coming with an incredible rush. And Cloten has realised it too late. Is there any stopping Lance Armstrong? For more than a dozen years, I've been privileged to report on one of the world's greatest athletes. Lance Armstrong's storyline, I don't think, will ever be repeated. A few days ago in Paris, he was winning his 7th Tour de France. Well, he's now traded the cacophony of that great event for the more gentle tropical sounds here of the staccatos. He's come down to the Côte d'Azur in the south of France with his rock star girlfriend, Sheryl Crow, and his 3 young children. A little bit of well-deserved rest and recreation, I think. Well, Paul Show and I have come here too to interview him, to talk about life before cancer, his 7 great Tour victories, and indeed what the future holds. But the first question is it really over?
The answer is absolutely finished. Not only by finished for this year, but for me, there's no going back on the decision. I'm 100% retired, and it would take an absolute miracle to bring me back, and I don't expect to see that miracle. I've done everything that I ever wanted to do and more, and it's really and truly time to move on.
All right. Lance, let's look first of all at this year's tour, the 7th Tour. It started so well on the island of the Moutier. Did you really think you'd catch Jan Ullrich for a minute?
I started and I saw him out there and I thought, wow, it just looks closer than a minute already. And then I got down off the bridge and again, just completely straight. And I said again to myself, I said, if I don't know any better, I'd swear I'm catching him. And Johan wasn't saying anything to me at that point. And then, 5 or 10 Ks later, he says, hey, you're catching Jan. And at that point, he was, clearly he was just there. And I thought, wow, either I'm having an incredibly good day or he's having a really bad day or a combination of both. But, I mean, it was surreal.
Over the last couple of years, you've made the team time trial something dear to your heart. Actually, I think it goes back to the time when you were with Motorola, when you really wanted to do well in that discipline. And this year, again, you won, but it's a very close margin.
Quite frankly, without the crash, we probably would have lost by a second or two, I have to say.
Is that why you didn't want to wear the jersey the next day?
After, we finished the race and we didn't see the crash. We did the podium, they give you the jersey and everybody's happy. And then that night we watched it and we realized, that's just too close. And so most likely they would have won and or matched us, which would have kept David in the jersey. So, we tried to make a good gesture and not start with it, but Jean-Marie LeBlanc wasn't having any of the good gesture that day.
Lance, the week or so that followed after that, you were put under pressure by Michael Rasmussen, who you didn't recognise the top rider, but he came through good on one big breakaway. Then we came to the first climb at Courchevel in the Alps, and then you were crossing swords with Alejandro Valverde. Did you rate this guy before you got to the Tour de France?
I'd have to say, yeah. Valverde was always in that mix. So a well-rounded rider, can climb, obviously can sprint very well, good team. But he was better that day than I think we had expected.
Well, going a bit further down to the Pyrenees, a couple of times this year, I mean, we spoke before the start of the Tour. We said this is the greatest team you've ever brought together. Had a little bit of a problem on the road to Gérard Mer. Seemed to come back.
A little bit of a problem.
But then it was a bigger problem on the Côte de Paillere because the telecom threw everything. This telecom just seemed to be so aggressive this year. Their job, I think, was to isolate you as quickly as possible and not let you set the tempo, as has been your habit.
It was an interesting tactic, and you could, leading up to Paillieres, you saw it coming, and immediately I was isolated. But that's the bad news. But the good news is that I was only isolated for about a kilometer. You know, my guys can't ride a kilometer sprint like that like some of their guys can. I'm sure if you took a picture of that, or if you saw that on TV, you thought, oh, he's in real trouble now. But immediately thereafter, it was just Ulrich and myself. So when you're playing one-on-one, and then you throw in a few other guys into the mix, it's not a problem.
What would have happened if there'd been more of a better entente in telecom? Because a couple of times Vino went on the attack, and I'm going like, excuse me?
I think everybody, I would come home at night after the stages and I'd say, you know, now I know it's time for me to stop, because I have no idea what those tactics are. I mean, no offense, but days like that where one would be out there and another one would chase them down without even naming names. I mean, we all saw the race, and even the bottom of Bonask, one climb later, I mean, Vino goes away and then Cloden chases him down with Ulrich on the wheel, and we all sort of sat back and said, what the heck is that?
Lance, let's stay in the Pyrenees here, because there was tremendous attacking on that road to actually climb up there from Bonask. Now, I thought that was very hard, considering the next day, stage 15, was the Queen stage. The one that you said was the hardest stage of the tour. You'd reckoned it with George and everybody. And it was also a very sad day because of the memories of Fabio Casatelli and your association with him. Everybody, therefore, had you down to win your first stage of the tour. But what actually happened? How did George come to get in the breakaway and leave you behind?
Well, earlier in the day, I don't know if it was in the meeting or just in the first case of the race, George said, hey, you mind if I jump into one of these groups? Because in every stage this year, these guys, they were attacking all over the place. From K0 just until, we were timing it every day. Most days were more than an hour that it would take for the break to go. And so everybody had the idea that they were going to make that break. And so George said, maybe I'll jump in a few. And so he went away, ended up being the one that stayed away. And in a situation like that, you've got the jersey behind, you've got a lot of riders in the break, and you have the privilege of sitting on.
For the first time ever that one of your teammates has won a stage in the tour.
Yeah, and for no other, I think sometimes the impression is that we say to the guys, you can't have individual goals, you can't have aspirations to win a stage or take the jersey. I think sometimes that's the thought within the cycling world or within the press, that we really force it on these guys that they have to be on one line of thinking, and that's just not the case. I mean, a situation like that, especially when you've got 6 or 7 or 8 other strong guys back in the group with me, no problem. No problem. This is just the first year that guys actually did it, and I don't know why. Perhaps it could even be a subtle thing where they know, hey, this is his last tour. Maybe he'll let us get away with more. But for me, they could have started to do that in 1999, and it would have been no problem. In fact, for a team and for a new sponsor, it works out unbelievably.
This tour, you never really seem to attack as we've seen you attacking in the past. We've always, Armstrong's going to attack first mountain stage, knock everybody out.
Yeah.
This year, you never really got to the top of a mountain without anybody being alongside you. Was that because you're getting a little bit older, thinking about the fact that I might have to pay for this effort the following day?
Absolutely. I mean, if you didn't just give me my answer, I would have said the exact same thing. I mean, I know now that at 33, almost 34 years old, I can still ride at a high level, but everything I do now is multiplied way more than it was 4, 5, 6 years ago when I was in my mid to late 20s. And so the days of attacking every day in the mountains and trying to take time and trying to build a bigger lead, those days are, well, they're really done because I'm done, but they were done anyways. And my goal was to have one attack. And I didn't know when it would come, but I knew I just needed one. And that was reinforced by the prologue. I mean, by buying a minute on Jan in the prologue, a minute and a half on Basso in the prologue, a minute 45 to some guys just in the opening time trial. I knew then I may not even need that one attack. And so Johan and I were talking, and we said, I mean, our formula now for the tour is you need one attack.
The last weekend, Lance, you hadn't won a stage yet. Of course, everybody's writing it up, the fact that you hadn't won a stage. How much did it matter to you?
God, I didn't read this stuff this year.
Well, you never read what I was writing about you?
Not this year.
Well, how much did it mean to you that you hadn't won the stage? Was there any pressure? Did you feel the pressure because the time trial is your speciality?
I have to say I was a little nervous about that. I was, maybe it even could have been, you know, something about, you know, your final TT, your final, for me, really my final day of suffering.
And you did suffer that day, didn't you? Because you could see it on your face.
I suffered, first of all, it was a very hard course.
Yeah.
Hilly, technical, never flat, ever. And starting fairly conservatively, but getting to the first time check and being 7 seconds down. So I had a little bit of a panic in there. But again, you know, having a guy like Johan in the ear saying, you know, you're looking good, him knowing that Basso and Ulrich were slowing down, and him confirming to me that I was continuing to get stronger and take time out of them, that was enough.
So Lance had clinched his 7th straight Tour victory, but there is still much more to come on Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, including this.
That was a mistake, to give that stage away.
But right now, enjoy some of the sights and sounds of his 2005 Tour victory. The express train is boring down here on the German cyclist.
This, to me, is a little piece of cycling history because Armstrong is on the wheel there of Ulrich and he's blown by him.
Oh, and he took one glance, Ulrich, and he's gone. Here they come now, driving up to the line. Lance is going to lead this Tour de France into retirement, having led his team to the fastest ever time trial in the history of the event. What determination.
Look at the acceleration now. He said, come on, mate, let's go, let's give it to them.
Armstrong wins the time trial and wins the Tour de France.
Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime on OLN, is presented by Honda. Introducing the half-ton Ridgeline. Above all, it's a Honda.
What a comeback this could be. Armstrong is the leader. That is astonishing. The acceleration of this man is incredible. Armstrong now has destroyed the field. Armstrong is toying with the top names of the cycling world. What will the Pirate do when this man gets on board?
And now the tables have turned. I think Armstrong has absolutely hit the wall.
That was, without a doubt, the worst day I've ever had on a bike.
That is the second fastest time trial ever seen. That's right, we're headed right back to the early days here on Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, presented by Honda Ridgeline, and we'll start right at the very beginning. So let's return to the interview and the soothing sounds of the afternoon on France's southern coast. Lance, you were developing as a one-day cyclist, having won the world title in 1993. We never talked about you as a Tour winner, but we certainly always talked about you as a Tour stage winner. This is your pre-cancer days. How did you see yourself then as a competitor and also as a person? That's a nice short question for you.
Yeah, easy answer there. I was a different type of athlete. I wouldn't almost say I didn't care about the Tour, but I certainly wasn't focused on it to have a big result or whatnot. So I was content to win a Flesh Wallonne, maybe win a World Championships, maybe win a Saint Sebastian, the World Cups. And but at the same time, I also didn't work as hard as I should have, and I didn't work as hard as I ended up learning how to work through the illness and after the illness. And so, as I've said many times, I mean, that point in my life came along and just said, okay, kid, this is a wake-up call. This is your chance to change your life and your career, your sporting career, forever. And you know, without that, I'd still be, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, but I'd still be focusing on Flesh Wallonne and Tour of Georgia, perhaps, because of an American event, things like that.
But the thing is, what you were able to do, you put this cross on your back to say, I want to represent the cancer community. It's kind of a crusade. And throughout the 7 years, that has been something that you've carried with you through those whole Tour de France years.
Yeah, and even in the beginning, I knew that that would be talked about less and less over the years, whether it's whether the people just get numb to that, or the press gets numb to that, or they want to talk about other things, or there's There's juicier things to talk about. I had a feeling that would happen, and it did. But ultimately, where it really matters, at home, on a national level, local, regional level in the States, I don't think that story ever got old, and I think that it mattered in hospitals, it mattered in clinics, and it mattered with doctors and patients and nurses and researchers, and that's what's important.
They might not talk about it in the press, but that thing you're wearing on your bracelet there, that on your arm, has been one of the incredible success stories. I mean, I got off the plane this morning, and I looked around. The French people, Dutch people, German people, even where I live in Africa, people are wearing that.
And the first thing I'll say, I can't take any credit for that, other than somebody had the great idea, and I said, that's a good idea, I'll wear that. Even being superstitious, I mean, I think in the beginning they said he'll never wear it because it's yellow. He might wear it when he puts on yellow, but he'll never start with it. And but something told me, just get over it, Lance. Put your superstition aside and wear it. And thank God I did.
All right, Lance, let's start with 1999. We didn't know you had this form when you came to the Tour de France. We didn't know you that well, or how you've been preparing and all that. You told Jim Okovich you could win the Tour. Jim is your long-standing, unwavering friend. He doubted that. And he changed his mind very rapidly after the prologue time trial result, which, of course, you won. But did you really think you could just come to the Tour and win it when, pre-cancer, you'd never been remotely attached to winning the Tour?
Well, we had a few good tests along the way. Did an okay Dauphiné. Did an even better Route du Sud, which is a small race between the Dauphiné and the Tour. And I had this feeling. But the prologue was still a massive surprise. Big time.
Well, we moved on then to Metz because Jan Kerspu picked up the yellow for a while. There's only the two leaders of the Tour in '99, you and him. And then came the time trial at Metz and you just crushed them.
Well, again, one of those days that was a little surreal in catching Olano as he was even riding in the...
Yeah, he'd never been past in his life before.
Right, riding in the World Champions jersey for the time trial. And I looked up the road, and before I caught him, I caught George. George started 2 minutes in front of him. So I caught George, and I thought, wow, I must be having a good day, because that's 4 minutes. And then I could see Olano, and I thought, oh, man.
But having done that in Metz in '99 then was sort of the start of the Lance recipe. Because we went to Sestriere and you whacked everybody with the first big mountain.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say about that is that in the later years they ended up changing. It couldn't really be the recipe because they kept moving that time trial around. And rarely after that year did we ever do a big time trial before the mountains. But, that could have been almost used as the first big attack of that tour. And then you get to Sestriere when again, before Sestriere, there were a lot of questions. Okay, he won the TT, okay, he's in yellow, but we don't really think he can climb the high mountains. And so for me, that was a big stress point as well. I wasn't sure either, but we soon found out in Italy.
Good. So we got to Paris, Lance. You won the first Tour on your comeback from cancer. When you sat down and reflected on the enormity of that situation, I mean, how did you analyze it? You'd won the first Tour.
I was so surprised I couldn't even analyze. I was still in shock that I had actually won the Tour de France. I'd love to tell you that I had this big moment where I figured it all out and figured out how I was going to continue to do it year after year after year. But at that point, I was still in shock.
Picking up with 2000, Lance. Midway in, we got to the Hautecam, and there was one guy a long way ahead, Javier Cho, and
8 minutes.
Yep, and then you started with an attack at the bottom that blew everybody off your wheel, and here you were on your own. And I never did know, did you not catch him on purpose, or could you not quite reach him?
Well, I have to admit that it wasn't my attack at the bottom. It was a terrible day, and like this year we did the Obisque and went down. Again, no teammates, not knowing what was going to happen. Pantani was there, he had a few teammates riding. Zula attacked. Pantani went after him, and I went after Pantani, and Zula was going. And I thought, oh boy, that's it. They were right, I can't win another one. because they were absolutely flying. Pantani pulled through, again, flying. And I just was staying on the wheel. And they did 2 or 3 rotations like that, and then they started to slow down, and then I went to the front and did a rotation, and Johan says to me, Zula's dropped. Oh, wow. So then I gave it a little more gas. A couple Ks later, he says, okay, Pantani's dropped, you're alone. And then I just gave it everything I had. I put the comment 2.5 minutes into Pantani, 4 minutes into Ulrich. But the truth is, I mean, I was giving everything to catch Ochoa. But with 8 minutes at the bottom, also a good rider, good climber, I couldn't catch him.
It's a bit sad to talk about that tour because there was a big battle between you and Pantani, and maybe one of the biggest regrets you had was the finish.
I mean, I don't even know how to go about saying this, but that was a mistake to give that stage away. And I'm sure that as I sit here today in 2005, I'm sure they're going to do Mont Ventoux next year. And it's one stage I never won, one mountain I never won. And it's the one mountain that I would have loved to have won. But.
Coming up on Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime.
Best day ever on a bike, bar none. Yep.
And find out why I reacted like this.
You just ruined my whole life.
No, well, I'm sorry.
That's all next when we return. There's a crash in the Punstall team. There's a touch of wheels. 2 riders are down here on the floor. Armstrong bringing his team home to the line. That is absolutely unbelievable.
Armstrong dragged them up the last kilometre almost by the scruff of the neck.
He took a look straight into the eyes there of Jan Ulrich and said, well, here I go, are you coming or not? And the answer is not.
And Ulrich's under pressure.
This man just opens a gap and makes Ulrich look like a club cyclist. Lance Armstrong has won the prologue. How on earth did he do that?
This is the move by Armstrong. He's going for the win.
By 2001, Lance Armstrong was a confirmed Tour de France champion, but some of his best performances were still to come. Let's rejoin Lance and my co-commentator Paul Sherwin here on Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, presented by Honda Ridgeline.
We had our viewers vote during the Tour de France on the top 25 moments, which we thought were your great 25 moments. And then we asked them to vote out of those 25 for the top 5. And
Who voted on the top 25?
All the viewers.
All the viewers.
And the one they voted for most was, of course, what became known as the look on the climb of Alpe d'Huez.
Right.
Now, there were 2 looks, really. There was a look of pain on your face on the previous climb, the Blandon.
Which I think,
was that
from
real
friends
pain?
telling me, I think you wrote me off that day.
No, we never would write you off, Lance.
No, Paul didn't.
Oh, Paul, just me?
You did.
Never. No, I've got to keep the excitement in the show.
We had to
I
ask
think you wrote me off.
We had to ask a few
There
questions.
were only 2 or 3 that didn't believe it. Was Paul Sherwin,
Yeah,
Bernard Tavenet on French TV,
yeah.
and one other. But everybody
That
else
must have been
said,
Phil Liggett. There you go. Now, listen. What about the bluff? Let's start with the bluff. Were you bluffing or were you really in trouble?
no, it was bluffing.
You were bluffing. Okay.
Right.
And
All
that
right,
made
now then.
Telecom go to the front and ride like nutcases over 2 climbs.
They had already
they
started.
did.
They had
They had
before the
started,
bluff.
yeah.
They had already started.
Yeah.
I didn't start it. They started it. They started riding fairly fast, fairly aggressively, and when a team rolls with that much confidence about the stage, which would then mean that they're confident for the overall. My idea at the time was let them be confident, let them believe that this is their day and this is their tour.
Then we go on to the mountain, of course, to Alpe d'Huez. It was a wonderful, fast start to the climb. I thought, my goodness, nobody's going to get to the top the way they hit the bottom of that climb. Then you went straight to the front. You looked around over your left shoulder, and you stared straight at Jan, and I said, are you coming or what? Was my words on the TV, and the answer is no.
But I'm going to be completely honest, because there's been so much. So you said they voted that the most memorable.
They did,
so
yeah.
so obviously there's been thought and discussion about the look. And the absolute truth is that I was not looking at Jan Ullrich.
You just ruined my whole life.
No, well, I'm sorry, but I wasn't. I was looking back down the road, first and foremost for my teammates, where if I was going to attack, which I wanted to do, but I got into trouble, how close were they going to be to come and help or come and sort of settle things down again from a team perspective. But also, it's not where's Jan, but where's Beloki? Where's Kovalev? Where's everybody else? And absolutely, and I will swear on my health, which I never do, but it wasn't a look at Jan. The way the angle played, it was. I mean, it looked like you looked right at him and said, are you coming or what? Yeah. But it wasn't a taunt. It wasn't a finger in the face or a look. It was.
But after the look,
I'm sorry, I hate to.
Whatever it went. No, after the look, whatever it went.
Then a little acceleration.
You jumped, and nobody joined you. So
right.
the answer was.
Well, that was the plan. Was let Chechu started out the West, high tempo. He pulled off. I thought that also, Roberto would be there, Tyler would be there, somebody else would be around, and I didn't see anybody back there, so I just went, just to test the waters. Nobody responded. Again, Johan immediately in the ear said, "You're alone." And at that point, you had 12 kilometers to go, 12-kilometer time trial up Alpe d'Huez. My best day ever on a bike, bar none. Yep.
But you didn't have the yellow jersey. Were you worried going into the Pyrenees that year about whether or not you could get rid of the guys who were in front of you?
Yes, and I always worry about that. That's not the last time we've done that. We did it last year with Vukler. Gave him 10, 12, 15 minutes or something. So I always worry. I always say to Johan every night and every day in the race, are you sure we're doing the right thing here? Don't worry, take it easy. These guys are going to crack. They're going to lose an hour in the mountains, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, are you sure? But he's always been right. Mm-hmm. And he almost always predicts it to the day.
But that day, you actually did blow everybody away. But you waited for Jan Ullrich when Jan went off the descent on the Col de Pedersen. That could have cost time waiting for him.
It did cost. Of course, it cost time because Simon came back, obviously, while you're sitting up and waiting. But knowing that wouldn't have been correct to keep going at that point. Knowing that we were going to finish at Plat d'Aix, which is more than 10K, uphill, steep, very hard. If you're going to win the race, you're going to win it there, regardless of whether or not you wait a little bit. And what did us waiting cost us? 1 or 2 minutes? I was willing to take that.
Just as an aside, Lance, just how close are you and Jan as friends?
Closer than people think. He told me at the start that he hoped he would get an invitation to the retirement party. He was there. He spoke at the party. It was unreal. And his English is good, but it's not great. So for him to, number one, show up, number two, agree to talk in broken English to a group that size, certainly people that are pro-Discovery or pro-Armstrong.
Mutual respect between two great champions.
Big guts. And so Jan is a very, very nice guy. Perhaps he's too nice.
In 2002, Roberto Heras reckoned that the best sporting memory he's got from his career, apart from winning the Vuelta with you, was actually pacing you up Le Mans. He said he could not believe how great he was on that day.
Yeah,
and at the end of the day...
He was almost too good that day.
Wasn't he?
He was flying that day.
He destroyed the field that day.
And that's one of the tricks of when you're, I've always tried to be very neutral with my facial expressions over the years, and if you're suffering, never look like you're suffering. Just have the same face, a blank stare, and I think Johan thought that I was feeling great, so he kept saying in the radio, "Faster, Roberto, faster," and I was absolutely on the limit, and I'm on the radio, I'm like, "No! Slow!" And Johan thought, because it was so noisy with the people, he thought I was saying go. And it's just, and the more I'm saying slow, the faster he's going. It was terrible. It was absolutely, I was lucky to survive that one.
You talked a little bit earlier about the Mont Ventoux, but the same year, you gave Richard Virenque like 20 minutes lead before he got to the Mont Ventoux, and another time the mountain cheated you.
Yeah, another time the mountain didn't forgive me.
No.
You know, there's just a few moments over my career where if you said, okay, you can go back and change it, I would have put the team on the front that much sooner and just brought, I think Virenque started with, he might have started with 10 minutes.
Well, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have brought it to 5 because that was, I did have really good legs that day on Vaughn too, I have to confess. And, that would have been another opportunity to win, but damn mountain.
Up next, we'll look back at the historic 2003 and 2004 tours. Find out which horrific moment Lance said this about.
That was the closest I've ever come to stepping off a bike.
As Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, continues on OLN. Belocchi's gone down and Armstrong has taken to the grass. I have never seen that in my life. Oh, what's happened here? What has happened there?
His chain is off, his chain is stuck, and it's complete and utter chaos.
This is a matter of pride again for Armstrong. A massive round of applause. He's driving to the line now. Lance Armstrong is going to take the stage. Yes! Armstrong is coming with an incredible rush. Is there any stopping Lance Armstrong in this Tour de France? And the answer is no, there is not. With his Tour victories in 2003 and 2004, Lance Armstrong charged into history. Right now, let's return to Nice amid the sounds of the cicadas on Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, presented by Honda Ridgeline.
Let's go on to 2003, the year you joined the famous 5 Club. Then all the pressure is off you then because you were joining the famous boys. But the team time trial must have given you a great moment of delight because the American team have finally won it.
Finally won. And we'd been trying, and when I say we, I mean an American team, had been trying to win forever, it seems. I mean, from the beginning of my tour career, 93 we were close, 94 again close. So for the first time, I knew what that was like to win that event, and it was an interesting TTT. And we did win, so we were all excited. But it was the first time in that tour where I said, uh-oh, something's not right. My pulls weren't that long. They weren't any faster than anybody else's. And I think even within the team, the other 8 guys, and Johan in the car said, that's not a normal team time trial from Lance.
Well, actually, the team, guys like George Hincapie, who are your closest friends, had doubts. Bill Stapleton had doubts. And that doubt was kind of exaggerated a little bit on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez because you had a horrendous day. You told us at the time that your brake was catching on the back wheel.
We had, again, that discussion this year during the tour, and I said, no, it was rubbing. Johan, no, it wasn't rubbing. No, yes, it was. No, it wasn't. And then finally we look at Juan, who, bless him, I mean, he's been my mechanic for a long time, a little kid from Mexico. And I said, Juan, was the brake rubbing? And he says, the brake was rubbing. And whatever, I mean, that doesn't, I mean, it's hard for people to listen to that and say, give me a break. You went up the Galibier with your brake rubbing? But, you know, when you walk down the next morning, and one of the brake pads, they're cork pads now. One of them looked like perfect cork, and the other one looked like charcoal. It's pretty easy to figure out that it was rubbing, but...
Let's stay in the Alps because the next day was the terrible accident to Belocchi and your little trip across country.
Yeah.
And you were chasing that man again anyway, Alexander Vinokourov.
I think the thing I remember most about that day was how hot it was. It was unbelievably hot. That was the hottest tour of all 7. And we were flying downhill, and Belocchi just got it wrong in one corner. And as they say in motorcycling, he just caught the wheel and then high-sided. And, I mean, and obviously hit so hard that he broke a lot of bones. And I've been lucky a few times in my life, but that might be the luckiest moment, certainly the luckiest moment in my sporting career. Not because I missed him, but because that passage into that field was right there, because 2 feet to the left and 5 feet to the right was a massive ditch. I was worried I'd get a flat because it was very dry and all the crops were dried out and sharp, and so I thought for sure this will blow the tire. But
So I'd always regarded you as a rider who rode really well in the heat. Time trial in Cap de Couvert, George Hincapie told me, Any other bike rider would not have finished that stage, would have abandoned. That must have been purgatory.
That was, how do you say it? Purgatory.
Horrible.
Purgatory.
Purgatory. Purgatory.
That was the closest I've ever come to stepping off a bike.
Really?
It was, and I really think Johan had that impression. I mean, at some point he just said, "Look, just keep going, just make it to the finish." And oddly enough, I mean, I did lose a lot of time, and I did almost lose the Tour, but I still somehow got second in the TT. I don't know how. Perhaps because I started way too fast. But I was absolutely crawling coming home.
But when you got to the Pyrenees, you were riding with a bit more sparkle, and then you were climbing up to Les Ardennes, and then you were on the floor.
And then I was on the floor.
Was that your fault, or was it the spectators' fault, do you think?
No,
fast.
that was my fault.
Yeah?
Absolutely my fault. Way too close. So I just caught the little musette bag that the kid had in his hand, and
I remember you saying to me at the time that
I'd love to have that musette.
We must find it for you. You said at the time, the thought that went through your mind, "I've lost the Tour, I've lost the Tour."
I lost. Yeah, I thought it was over. Either something was wrong. I mean, when you crash, you automatically take inventory. Okay, everything's here. No major problems, nothing broken. And then you get up and you check if the bike is in order. Is it broken? And I just took off on that bike. We didn't change a wheel. We didn't do anything. Just
Is that why the gear slipped, or whatever happened? Because you had. What happened?
Then I had, some gear slipped, and then.
Looked very painful.
That did look painful, didn't it? But it wasn't painful. But I can see how it certainly looked painful.
Well, Jan waited for you.
And then again, to mix things that we've talked about over the years and throw Jan into the mix. He and I actually talked about this year, and I apologized to him for talking about that, for actually writing it in the book, that our analysis was that he didn't wait. And he told me, he said, "Look, I was waiting." And I said, "You know what? I totally believe you. And I'm sorry for saying that." And, at the time, Tyler told me that they weren't waiting. So I totally believed that. That's what we watched on TV. It looked like they were still riding fast. I had the information from Tyler, who said, "They didn't wait for you, Lance." And so I put the two together, and I thought, well, he didn't wait. But I tend to believe it. And I regret saying that.
So then coming into the final time trial, you didn't have a massive advantage. You didn't have a buffer as you had in previous years.
But I did do a rain dance.
And it was a horrible day.
That day.
Ulrich was taking major risks because he, that year, seemed to have the ability to grab you in the time trial.
Right. Well, it was...
You were similar time. He was actually a couple of seconds up on you at the first time check.
Yeah.
We wondered, Lance has started conservatively, the weather's bad. Then he went down.
Before Les Ardennes, I think the gap was about 15, 19 seconds. And then after that, it came up to close to a minute. But every day after that, because we had a few days between the mountains and the time trial, there were other days. And we actually were sprinting for time bonuses. One day, he took a bonus, I got second, and the gap came down by 1 or 2 seconds. And people were talking about that being the swing of the Tour. Is it going to come down to a matter of seconds? Are these guys going to be sprinting for time bonuses on the Champs-Élysées? I mean, that sounded like the worst idea I had ever heard. But the TT was, if you consider he beat me by 1.5 minutes and kept a couvert, he needed to make up a minute in the final TT. Well, of course you would think that he could do that. The first official check, I was 3 seconds down, but at the first kilometer, we had somebody standing at 1K. I was 6 seconds behind after 1K. Johan told me I was 3 seconds behind, but...
But at the end of that tour, everybody reckons that was one of the most dramatic tours of all of your
Yeah, I think that was the one people...
You won by 61 seconds the Tour.
61. Yeah, but it was...
So people now thought you were fallible.
People loved that one, but I hated that one, so...
Yeah, but people now thought you were... The riders themselves might have felt they could beat you in 2004 because you proved to be a little bit like a human being, You could be attacked.
Yeah. No, that was the impression, I think, within the peloton and also within this world of cycling experts and commentators. When I took that top step in 2003, they said, don't get too used to it up there because you're done.
All right, Lance, on to 2004. And once you got into the big mountain, we came the other way around in 2004, so the Pyrenees were first. You had one rival that seemed to have your measure, Ivan Basso. And the two of you remained for 2 days in the mountains. He won the first day, you won the second.
Yeah. He was, Ivan was impossible to shake. I actually thought he was riding as well, if not better than me, the first day in La Mogie. I mean, we were both giving it everything, but there were a few moments where I thought, you know, maybe he'll pull off about right now, and I can go to the front and set the tempo, because he was riding strong. And then the next day in the Plateau de Bay, that was, if I had to pick 4 or 5 days, I mean, that was a good day for me. I felt amazing, and an amazing day for the team to have myself and Acevedo and Basso being the last 3 guys left.
Then you went up to the Alps, and you obliterated the Alps, totally dominant. But to me, and I think to a lot of other people, including Bernard Hinault, when you took that stage into the Grand Bornand, that was impossible. But where did you get that from to come by Cloden?
I just got caught up in the race. You know, the last hour of the race. We did Coiffry just before that. Floyd set a fast tempo. There were not many guys left. Floyd attacked on the downhill. Jan went after him. Other guys attacked. And there was just a flurry of attacks, and I just got caught up in that thing. And I thought, why can't I race too? You know, let's go for it now.
That day when you beat Cloden, what did Bernard Hinault say to you?
Pas de cadeau, he said that day. Pas de cadeau, no gifts.
When we return, Lance discusses a comeback to the Tour, in a manner of speaking.
And I don't care who's slated to ride in the car that day, if it's Alpe d'Huez, I'm kicking them out, I'm jumping in with Johan, and I don't know that I could stay in the car. I might be on the hood.
Plus his thoughts on who will win in 2006. You might be surprised by his answer. It's Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, right here on OLN.
Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime on OLN is presented by Honda. Introducing the half-ton Ridgeline. Above all, it's a Honda.
Welcome back to Lance Armstrong, the ride of a lifetime, presented by Honda Ridgeline. Let us return to the chirping symphony of the cicadas at Lance Armstrong's temporary home in Nice, France, for the conclusion of his retirement interview.
Lance, you are the best American cyclist, that's indisputable, but there's some good American cyclists right behind you, men who can challenge for the Tour de France. But when you look back, what will be your legacy to the sport of American cycling, do you think?
I don't know, and I don't, as I've said during this tour, I've had that question a few times, and it's thank goodness it's not up to me to decide what my legacy will or won't be. But I think that it perhaps will be judged, from a sporting perspective, it will be judged from a competitive standpoint, but also from an industry standpoint. I mean, we all know that my success, or the team's success, and more importantly, the team's success over the last 6 or 7 years has changed the industry in a big way. And the next year or 2 or 3, we'll know what it did or didn't do for the bike business. And it's my hope and my dream that the business just keeps going right along the way it is now, just growing, great, road sales increasing, people really falling back in love with the skinny tires. From a sporting perspective, I think I'm leaving the sport in perfectly good hands. I don't know that we have a person who's going to win the Tour de France next year, but look at the crop that we have now. If you didn't even watch the race. Somebody handed you every day the results of the 2005 Tour de France, and you looked at the top 10, only the top 10, on a daily basis, on an overall basis, even from a team perspective. There's a lot of USAs up there. And we all know the names, but I mean, I think between myself this year, Floyd, Levi, George, on and on and on. We have a great crop rider. If you can just consider this year with Floyd and Levi being in the top 10, if you're top 10, close to top 5, you're not that far from winning. And if you take out the 4 minutes, 41 seconds to Ivan Basso, it's close. And if a few things change and guys do things a little differently and the race is raced differently, Why not? Why not?
Will you still retain the passion? Because I remember earlier this year, Cheryl was saying she tried to watch Milan San Remo with you, but you wouldn't sit down. You were, you were screaming at the TV.
I suppose I will. I suppose I will. And I hope that Johan comes along and develops another guy, because I'm going to come straight back to the tour. And I don't care who's slated to ride in the car that day. If it's Alpe d'Huez, I'm kicking them out. I'm jumping in with Johan. And I don't know that I could stay in the car. I might be on the hood, because I'll be that excited. I love cycling. I love the sport. I love the event. I love its characters. I love the tactics. I love the work that goes into it. You know.
Well, that leads us to the obvious question. I mean, I know you want to move away from the sport now. You want to go into retirement. You need time to think. But what do you think that your role's going to be with Discovery Channel team? Do you want to develop? Do you want to give up? I mean, like when Sean Yates retired, Phil Anderson retired, they passed a lot of information on to you. You now are the holder of the knowledge.
Well, I think between Johan and myself, if you brought us an athlete with the talent and the package to win the tour, even if they were close, we could do it with them. We could absolutely 100% show them how to win it. Now, does that person come to us, or do we develop that person within? But the answer to your question is, I plan on being very involved. I mean, this is, just to be totally honest with you, this is a team that I'm a part owner in. So that's not a team that you just walk away from. And what I wanted to say earlier was that I'm not leaving cycling. As I said, I love it. I'm devoted to it. I will support this sport for as long as I live. I'll never dog it. I'll never rip on it. If it's the sport, if it's the industry, I think the bicycle's the greatest thing around, man. I mean, so I'm here to stay for the sport, but I'm also here to stay for the team, and I'm looking forward to the day that somebody else wears a yellow jersey at Discovery.
Who's going to win the tour next year?
Who
do you want to win the tour next year?
I have no idea who did I ask? I asked a very good journalist the other day. I said, who's going to win the Tour de France next year? And he looked at me and he said, George Hincapie. And I said, wow. So why do you say that? He says, a lot of people think that. Not to put any pressure on George, but...
that would be great, wouldn't it?
It would be good. It would be good. A great story, a great person, tons of experience. I don't know that George wants to give up the classics and focus an entire year on the tour, to be honest. But between Ulrich and Basso and a few other guys that come along, it's going to be an amazing tour. I don't think it will be raced at all the same way it's been raced the last 7 years. I think there will be a drastic change in tactics and tempo and style of racing. I think it'll be completely different. But I will be parked in front of the TV waiting to find out.
A few people asked me since you made your speech on the Champs-Élysées. I mean, we have a rough idea of what you were trying to say to certain people. But a lot of people in the United States weren't quite sure what the last part of your statement was about.
Well, as you know, there's a vocal minority in the press room. There's a vocal minority on the side of the road. There's a vocal minority just in the world who just don't want to believe it. But the last few words there, that was for them. And it's unfortunate because I think regardless of who it is that comes along, they're going to have to answer those questions. This sport is always going to be in the crosshairs. And perhaps it deserves to be, because what we saw in 1998 told us that these are not a bunch of altar boys running around, potentially. But that was for them, and I won't miss that part. I have to say, I'm glad that those days are done. I'm glad that there's not going to be somebody always calling you a thief, a cheater, a crook, a fraud. I mean, people don't understand that, but I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, well, imagine being a musician, and they basically say that you're Milli Vanilli. You never sang.
Yeah.
Or you're a journalist, and they say that you're like Jason Blair. You made up the story. Or you're a politician. You did something so unethical that you deserve to be kicked to Siberia. That's what it is. And that's downright, I mean, that is offensive. And so for that, those were my words to them. I had to say it. I thought about it.
One final question, Lance. September 1992 to July 2005. When you look back, whenever it is, 1 week, 1 year, when you're doing something else in the world, how would you sum up that period of your life?
It's a great moment, great period of my life. Great times. I learned a lot. I took a lot from it. I was given a lot from cycling. I was given things that I never thought I would have. I never thought I would have a platform to speak about. Well, first of all, when it started, I never thought I would have cancer. But then when I was diagnosed, I never thought that I would have such a platform. It gave me that. It gave me financial reward, which I hate to say it, but I have to say it because as a kid who came into the sport making $18,000 a year with Subaru Montgomery, even then I thought that was a ton of money. And now to have the freedom and the peace and quiet that I'll have for life and my children will have, I can't put that into words. And so I'm eternally grateful. It taught me how to act in many ways, and at times it taught me how not to act. It showed me the world, all over the world. Took me places that I never thought I'd go. Taught me a few languages. Showed me how to pick a bad guy from a good guy very quickly. And I think that kind of stuff, those are life lessons that some people take 50, 60 years, and I learned it in 33. So for me, it's been one hell of a good deal.
Well, all we can wish you, Lance, is a happy retirement. Thanks for a great 15 years.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun. See you in 2007. Just kidding.
And so Lance Armstrong's cycling career comes to a conclusion. 13 incredible years from world champion and one-day racer to cancer survivor to the man who has inspired and amazed for 7 incredible years. Maybe someday we will have the opportunity again to report on another 7-time winner of the Tour, but we'll never again have the chance to report on an athlete and, more importantly, a person like Lance Armstrong.